Hey, everybody, it's Jon Fleischman with another weekly one on one podcast interview here at So Does It Matter? And of course, you know that we have this podcast because we're always asking that question. So, does it matter? And actually, it's very apropos that we have our special guest today because what he's going to talk about today very much is in line with what we try to do here at this site, which I consider ourselves watchdogs. We're trying to keep an eye on what's happening in our democracy and what's going on, and we need to explain what's going on and why it's happening. And you can't get to the why until you know the what. And our guest is an expert and has led a team of experts in helping everybody to have some tools to figure out what's going on. So, hi, Ryan Sabalow with CalMatters. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. So everybody knows that I do this if you've seen any of my podcasts, but I went on to ChatGPT and I said, I'm going to have to introduce Ryan Sabalow of CalMatters today on my podcast. Can you give me an introduction? And it's printed one, but I've not read it because I always wait to read it. And then we just see what they have to say about you.
Okay.
Usually it turns out okay. So I wouldn't worry too much, but I'm going to put on that's why I have my glasses on today so I can read this. Today, I am joined by Ryan Sabalow, an investigative reporter with CalMatters, one of California's leading nonprofit news organizations covering state policy and government. Ryan focuses on some of the most consequential and complex issues facing California, including wildfires, water policy, environmental regulation, and how state government decisions affect everyday residents. His reporting often digs into the intersection of politics, bureaucracy, and real-world impact, helping readers understand not just what is happening, get this, but why it matters. See, right in the theme. Before
Well, I
joining
do have
Cal-
to make a quick correction on there. It's pulling some of my past background. I used to be a reporter at the Sacramento Bee, where I was primarily an investigative
now
reporter.
you're in the dungeon of of digital democracy. I'm
Right.
gonna finish though. So before joining CalMatters, Ryan reported for the Sacramento Bee, where he covered. We're just gonna go through, and then finally, I'm looking forward to talking to him today about his work and his seeing inside California policy circles and what stories the public should be paying closer attention to. So that's the generic introduction. Um, I'm going to help out here over at CalMatters. Ryan, I'm going to say is heading up. I don't know if that's accurate, but is a point person for this amazing project that they are doing that you need to know about and you need to hear about it, because when you're done hearing about it, you're going to be activated and able to do things in interacting with the state legislature that you've never been able to do before. So with all that having been said, Ryan, hello.
Oh, well, thank you. So, yeah, I wouldn't say I'm in charge of digital democracy. I'm a reporter that's been using the system a lot. And so basically, for a little bit of background, I think it's worth pointing out what CalMatters is. So we're a nonprofit newsroom, the only one in the state that's exclusively dedicated to covering politics and policy. We're fiercely nonpartisan, and we've been around for about 11 years. And what digital democracy is for the first time, we basically made the Capitol searchable, which is a remarkable thing. So if you pull up digital democracy right now, you could type in the word Temecula, if you wanted to, into the search bar and be able to see every bill discussion with a searchable transcript that mentions the word Temecula. You can see any bill that references the word Temecula, and you can see any of the lawmakers that are representing Temecula, which is super cool. And you can do that with everything out there. And to kind of put this in perspective of how
You picked a Republican area, so that's going to be Senator
well, you could
Kelly's.
also search for Britney Spears or a curse word of your choice. There are several curse words that have been used in hearings over there. Basically, you can look for anything. And so the way this all works is, for the first time, every word spoken in the legislature is now picked up by AI, and AI generates a transcript of all the hearings. So that's a remarkable thing. Before, this was all, you had to either be in the Capitol to understand what was going on, or you had to go through their clunky videos that they posted, where if you're only interested in one bill in one hearing, there may be 55 bills that they discussed at that one committee, and they usually give them out of order, so you don't know which one it is. And it's very difficult to be able to follow a specific piece of legislation. And so now every bill gets its own page that has every hearing discussion about that bill pop open and see a very easy to follow how each lawmaker voted or didn't vote. A lot of times lawmakers, one of the reports that we've done and several investigations that we've looked into is how they use the non-voting, where they just basically during the roll call, they stay silent. I actually quoted John in one of those stories
That's
about
right.
how he was frustrated that some Republicans didn't vote on a bill. And, his point was that we sent him there to cast a vote, not to be quiet during these things. If you don't like a
Yeah.
bill, you're
We
supposed to say
it
it, right?
it's actually kind of funny. We went back and forth because I said something about that. You reported on a story, and included my quote, and then I wrote an entire story about your story.
Which was
And so
great, which
actually,
we
I'm not
appreciated.
and I'm gonna link that down below. So if you guys wanna see that little exchange,
Well,
you can check it out.
the other thing that we've got in there is money. And so we've got all the political contributions from all the different orgs. And for the first time, we have this really comprehensive thing that actually tracks all the votes in real time. And so what's super cool about this from me as a reporter is you could start to see how influence groups actually shape the legislative process on each lawmaker's page. So we have a page for each lawmaker as well, what we call the alignment meter. And you could actually type in there to see, let's use an example like the ACLU. You can actually see every time the ACLU has taken a position on a piece of legislation through the process, where they're basically saying, we want lawmakers to vote no, we want lawmakers to support this bill. Lawmakers, you can actually now see how many times they voted that group's way. So you can start to
That may not even be the best example. The best example might be the Chamber of Commerce or a public employee union, because then that would ACLU is not a big money giver, but now you can also track
yes.
how those votes line up with the contributions.
Absolutely. And in that alignment meter, it tells you how many times they've had an opportunity to vote that group's way. And it also tells you, and it gives you a percentage of time. And you can also see how much money that particular lobbying group has given that lawmaker over time. And so as a reporter, this is super valuable because makes it easier for a journalist, particularly one who's new to the Capitol and doesn't know who the players are, things you're supposed to kind of intuit just from being there. I'll give you an example. Went in to go report on a story. I went to the Senate to go report on a story, very new to covering the Capitol. And I heard that, Steve Glazier regularly voted against unions, which is very unusual for Democrats in the Capitol.
Former state senator Steve Glazier, who actually before that was a high level staffer for Jerry Brown for many years.
Yeah. And so, and I came back and one of the reporters said, yeah, that's not unusual that Steve Glazier voted against the union bill. He's known for that. And so I went down and I as soon as I got to the office, I popped open his legislator page and I typed in some unions into his alignment meter. And what you saw was that he only voted for unions, 60 to 70% of the time or something like that. And when you look at
Well,
other
rather that being unusual because a lot of Democrat legislators vote with them 100% of the time,
not necessarily 100, but
or
there's
a
a
lot higher.
number of legislators are in the 90s on some of the big unions. And so it makes it super helpful to be able to kind of get a sense of who these people are, kind of who they're aligned with, who's giving them money. And the transcript feature and being able to actually pop open a transcript and to be able to read the remarks in these hearings is super valuable, that anybody who's interested in politics in California can really see how legislation shapes. And these hearings are transcribed in as close to real time as possible. So the way it works is we have AI goes through and does a first read of the transcript. And it's pretty good. We use facial recognition software and voice recognition software to pick up on the frequent flyers. Lawmakers talk a lot. They tend to. So that's easy to pick up. And there's also certain lobbying organizations that are always at the mic. And so we pick up on their lobbyists. And then we have, after the initial transcript is made, to try to make sure that they're as accurate as possible, there's a team of paid-in contractors that we have. Most of them are Cal Poly students because our tech hub is basically down in Cal Poly, and they go through and do a back read of the transcripts and make sure that
So you're employing a bunch or working with a bunch of students like on the Central Coast, Cal Poly, San Luis
yeah,
Obispo?
yep,
Oh, that's
yep.
pretty cool.
And so they go through and they do, one of the things that the AI will sometimes, stick a name with the wrong quote, or, the AI will misread something and they go and transcribe that. It's not perfect. We still have some, quotes get messed up and things like that. But if someone points them out, we fix it as quickly as possible. But it makes it super cool. And it allows you to be able to actually follow specific pieces of legislation that you care about in real time. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it sounds amazing.
And we also have the ability to be able to see things like which lawmakers speak the most and which lawmakers speak the least. And I've done some stories about these are the most talkative lawmakers, these are the least talkative lawmakers. And your audience, I think, would find it interesting that the least talkative lawmakers tend to be Republicans. There's a bunch of Republicans. There are some Republicans like Carl DeMille that talk all the time, even though the Democrats would probably prefer he did not. But there are others who don't say much. And they tend to be more moderate Republicans from swing districts. And we did a whole story about that.
Wait, but not always. I have to kind of interject because I'm somebody who has my legislators looked up. So we'll talk about this a little bit later, that you have an actual system whereby people can sign up and get a weekly alert on their own legislator. And so I'm getting ahead a little bit because we're going to talk about that. But just because I can, so my two legislators are State Senator Kelly Sayerto, who, by the way, represents the aforementioned Temecula, and Assemblyman Phil Chen, he's my representative in the legislature, in the assembly. And so I was laughing because talk about the tale of two legislators. Sayerto is the 16th most talkative, I assume, legislator, because these numbers go way up higher than numbers in the Senate. So this is out of 120. He's the 16th most talkative legislator. And get this, folks, he's said 131,843 words at a microphone during the session, which is amazing. But the funny part is then you go to my good friend Phil Chen, who is my local assemblyman, and you would think that he's almost like a deaf mute because
Yeah,
out
he
of
doesn't talk a whole
120
lot.
legislators, Phil is ranked 100 and
Yep.
has only uttered 6,270 words on the floor of the legislature. And so talk about the tale of two, both Republicans, both represent the same area. One of them is very verbose and the other one is very not. So
Yeah.
anyway, I just kind of
And I mean, the one thing is that we're having a hard time, and it's very difficult to do these sorts of analysis, is like the top speakers on our list tend to be the people who oversee the chamber. So you get a lot of procedural yam, talking, or the people who run some of these committees talk a lot because they have to introduce the bills and that kind
well,
of
I can
stuff.
hear Phil now. If I call him up and ask him about this, what he's going to say is, "Oh, that guy Kelly, he talks about everything. Talk, 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 talk. I wait to speak when it matters." I can
That's
hear him
exactly what
now.
they said. One of my favorite quotes of all time that I've ever got from a PR person is I reached out to a Republican Assembly member, Greg Wallace, for that story. And the quote his PR person told me was, I love the irony of a reporter trying to get an interview from the least talkative lawmakers. And in this case, Assemblymember Wallace is going to let his votes do the talking and he's going to focus on the issues or something along those lines. But I just thought it was very, a lot of the quotes you get from the PR people, they tend to be sort of robotic sounding. And I thought that was just a kind of a fun and human response from
That's
them.
hilarious.
So, but the other thing that's cool about this is, you have the searchability, you have the ability to be able to follow bills, but you can also get into and actually start doing deep dives into the campaign finance stuff. So we have a whole search page that you could pop open and you could start going through and seeing how much specific groups have given to specific legislators. You could set it up so that you can look for groups of legislators to see how much money, say, Chevron has given the 5 Republicans in your district or in your region or whatever. It makes it very cool, and we're always working to improve it. And so, yeah, it's been super fun. We're building this plane while it's flying, and I get to have a small part in doing something really fun with AI that I think is helping make a very secretive legislative process much more open and transparent.
Well, I will tell you this, because as I've gotten on the phone, not only with, or email with my legislators, but as I talk to other legislators and I'm able to like call them and ask them about things that I have found looking in this system, they are still kind of trying to pretend the system does not exist. They still think that I don't get something in my email box every week that tells me how they vote in committee. And the best part about it is when I get my email, there's a little button at the bottom that says change your legislators. And so you can actually, just because I live in one district doesn't mean I can't swap them out if I want to see, or you just go to their page.
No,
So
we had a great interaction with a lawmaker. I won't say which one because it wasn't something for publication, but it was a Democratic lawmaker who, they're following those My Legislator emails too. You can bet their comms team is for sure. And one of the categories that we have is, does your lawmaker receive oil money? And This Democratic lawmaker was very upset that, we had disclosed in the My Legislator email that they had received oil money. And so our tech team looked into their concern because they said, we've made sure never to receive any oil money. And when we looked into it, sure enough, they'd received this, I have $1,500 or something like that. Not a large amount, but it was from a company that does oil refineries. And so, it's helping them. It's helping them
They're
stick to
like,
their
they're
campaign.
like, we did? We didn't even know that.
Exactly. They didn't know it because it was categorized. You couldn't tell it was an oil thing until you actually pulled up their webpage. But the system had categorized that accurately as an oil company donation. So we're helping them keep honest on their campaign promises. I'm sure that lawmaker had said that they didn't want to take oil money, and they're not going to. And I have a
Now I
feeling
got to
that
wonder if they return the money.
I would imagine they might have. I didn't follow up, but that's something. So I think I love that.
I'm cynical. That's where you're like, hey, can you take back your $1,500? But you know what? If the owner of the company wants to send us a check, we're not going to object. Sorry, I'm a bit cynical when it comes to all that. So.
You should be. The other thing that's cool about digital democracy that I really like is, so this isn't available to the public. We're only making this available to newsrooms around the state. Part of the impetus for digital democracy was that, the core of newspapers has seen their ranks absolutely decimated over the last 20 years as, primarily from the loss of things like Craigslist and classified ads and, changing reader habits and all of that. You used to have small papers would have their own correspondent in the Capitol keeping tabs on their local lawmaker. A friend of mine used to be the Capitol reporter for the Stockton Record, of all places. Stockton Record doesn't have the resources now to have and they haven't for several years. And so what we did was we wanted to create, since we have this system that's keeping track of all these lawmakers in real time as best as we can, what they wanted to do was they created a system, we call it the tip sheet system. And the way this works is we have told the AI to look for certain things, such as, unusual amount of speaker participation in a hearing, unusual amounts of moneyed interest groups in hearings. We have it looking for shady procedural things like last minute gut and amends of bills where they will take a piece of legislation that has made it all the way through the process, has had multiple opportunities to have a transparent and open hearing discussion. And then, 2 days before the session ends or whatever, they'll strip that language out and replace it with something different.
I mean, like they did with Prop 50? Oh, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but that one, at least there were some hearings and things like that, right?
Right.
This happens
That actually
regularly.
was high profile. It actually, to your point, it happens a lot and nobody knows about it.
Right, exactly. And so we've got to looking for things like that. The other thing is sometimes the legislature, this has not happened yet, but we've got it looking for it. But sometimes the legislative leadership will try to get a bill that it has as its priorities through a committee, but they know that the committee doesn't have enough members that are supportive of it. And so sometimes what they'll do is they'll swap members of the committee for just that one vote. And so we have it looking for unusual committee shifts right before votes. We have it looking for things like, say the labor is very influential. And if you start to see things like the teachers unions on one side of a bill, but the trades unions on the other, that's an indicator of tensions. We have it looking for things like if Democrats aren't aligned on a bill and you actually have Democrats voting against a Democrat bill, or if Republicans are split on legislation, it's all indicative of tension and possible newsworthiness. And so we've set all these triggers up. And every week or every day as the hearings are transcribed, the AI is spitting out story ideas saying, hey, you might want to look at this hearing. And we've shared the system out to reporters across the state to help them keep better tabs on their legislature. A really cool example of that was there's a veterans bill that would try to ban these companies that do VA assistance. And it's generated a lot of discussion in the Capitol, and because there's some concerns that some of these companies might be doing unscrupulous things. And there was a really great tip sheet that it generated about this really fascinating discussion between a bunch of Democrats, some of whom are veterans, talking about this bill on the Senate floor. And the Orange County Register just last week did a story about that. And as part of they have a weekly feature that says, hey, here's what your lawmakers did in Sacramento this week. And they wrote a nice little story off the tip sheet. And so that's what we're doing. We're sharing that out I use it all the time. I did about 50 some stories last year. About half of my stories were tip sheet story ideas where I got a
Oh,
tip from that and ended up running with it. So it's pretty cool.
let me know when you decide to make that available to mainstream media adjacent Substack. What do we call us? Independent journalists. I'm not ideologically independent, but that
But
sounds
it's
like a
super
great
cool.
resource.
No, and it's super cool, and we're still working on it. It's still a very much a work in progress. The AI sometimes likes to flag things that aren't news and things like
Oh,
that.
well,
But
we've all done that before. That's a matter of fact, I have that conversation with people a lot because one of the questions I get is how much do you use AI for what I do on my Substack or what you do? And what I have found is that AI is particularly useful for research, especially if you say, "Hey, give me these facts," and then put next to it the link of the source. Because
mhm,
then it's like having somebody before you go to the library putting all the books out that you need on the table. So you
right,
don't have to spend time in the library. But if you then say, take all of the facts you found in these books and craft a story, and it doesn't work because then you say fact check your own story and it'll be like, well, none of this is correct. And I go, well, you just wrote it. And they're like, yeah, well, we wanted to write something that we thought you'd like rather than what was factual. Well, why would you do that? Well, we're sorry. We were just trying to appease you. And
yeah.
but
Well,
anyways, all right.
what's nice is that the things that we've got AI looking for are good indications of tension,
Right,
and it's flagging things very well. Just the challenge we're finding is it has a hard time telling you why. It wants to
right.
get a little goofy.
Context.
Yeah. But if you see a high, and it's all so those triggers that we've told to look for, we have it weight that. So the most triggers, the top of the stack that we have these tip sheets kind of appear, and it's gotten very, very good. An example of that was the AI or the stories on the Prop 50 stuff. When they were debating that in the legislature, that was obviously we were going to cover that. That was news regardless of any tip sheet. But when I looked at the tip sheets the next day, those were all at the top of the stack, meaning
It's working.
it had picked up on the most newsworthy thing of the day. But what I love about it is it also helps you just find quirky Bill stories. And I
For
think
sure.
and also just like I find it interesting when a bill dies in public in the legislature because it says something about the lawmakers, right? It says something about what was this pinch point that was too much for the Democrats to support a fellow Democratic bill,
Boy,
and it flags those,
we
which is
could have
super
long
fun.
conversations about all of this, but I've got two more things that I want to cover, and we're
Okay.
at the tail end of this interview. The first of which is, well, I'm going to tell you what they both are, and then we can space it out. One is, I'd like you to tell people a little bit more about this email alert system that you have. And then the last piece that I want to talk about is more of a practical. If somebody goes to CalMatters, website, where are they going to engage in all of this? So it's kind of the. But first, why don't we talk about this My
So
Legislator system?
yeah, so the My Legislator email, we figured that this is kind of like a tip sheet for the public. We just talked about tip sheets. And what it does is we've got all of this data coming in real time. And what we wanted to do was to give voters the ability to see unfiltered what their lawmakers do, what they did last week. And so if you sign up on CalMatters website, if you go to any CalMatters story, there's a link to the sign up page where you type in your I think you could just enter your address and it'll tell you which lawmakers to choose. And it'll spit out every Monday that the session is going some key votes that they made, a summary of their campaign donations. It'll find the AI spits out a quote, and then CalMatters staff picks the best ones for all 120 people. We a punchy quote that they said in hearings. Oftentimes, nobody speaks during hearings. Sometimes, and so you might not have one on there. It also sends you a link to their press releases, so you can see what they're saying, and it provides you just a nice little roundup of what your lawmaker did this week, or your two lawmakers, your senator and your assembly member. It's very cool, and we've
Okay,
been
well, now,
getting.
now you're going to make me look. Since we know that Phil Chen never talks, it'll be interesting. Let me look here and see if they gave him. If you got a quote from Phil Chen, since he never
I
talks.
would be very surprised if there was one on there.
There is there is not. There is no quote from Phil, but let's go look and see if Mr. Talk Talk, my senator, has a quote. Look, there he is. Notable quote of the week. Quote, "We have made it so expensive to build anything in California." Senator, you are spot on there. Assemblyman, next week say that so that it shows up. Actually, this week say that so that it shows up in your update next week. All right. Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm just making
no,
it all personal.
And
It's
it's
right in front of me.
so lawmakers send out their own newsletters, but you're only getting what they want you to see, right?
Right, of course.
What I love
Which, by the
about
way, I
this,
noticed you can access at the bottom of each one of them, there's a link to where they put out their own press releases.
yep, so you
You don't
can
need
see
to
what
bother with that because the stuff that you're reading on these updates, with all due respect to my legislators, is so much better than what they want you to hear. Because you get to actually see what's going on and what's happening. And then my favorite thing about it, as I look at the email, is it's not just what happens on the floor. You guys are tagging bills votes that they cast in their committees.
Yep,
So I would say
absolutely.
this to all legislators that are watching this, all staffers that are watching it. You're not safe anywhere. You're not hiding anywhere because we're seeing all these votes and it's
Yeah,
all
and
there.
honestly, the floor votes tend to be because there's no testimony, right? They don't allow testimony from the public on the floor. Floor votes I feel like, are less interesting than the actual committee process, where there's more opportunity for lawmakers to debate and discuss, and members of the public to come in. So I think committee votes, and that's what's super cool about the main digital democracy site in general, is say you're really interested in a particular bill, you type in that bill number into Digital Democracy, you could go down and watch the hearings for each time. So each bill has to go through at least one policy committee, usually couple plus 2 floor votes. You could follow that through the process, and we also allow you to be able to see how the bill changed through the process. So you can actually go in and look at the different versions of the bill, the amendments. We've got the bill analyses on there where you don't have to download some stupid PDF. You could read it right there. Super cool. You can find all this stuff. CalMatters, Digital Democracy, if you just do a Google search, it'll pop right up. And like I said,
And
if
by
you
the way,
want
I'll have a link below to start you if you're watching this, if you're not listening to it, but and I'll put it in the show notes if you're watching it on a podcast, but I'll send you a link to get over there. But so here's what I would tell anybody who's made it this far into the podcast. The first thing to do is go to a CalMatters story. Doesn't matter which one it is. Like you said, scroll to the bottom and sign up. Sign up for the deliveries that come to your mailbox. And that's your easiest way to gain entry into this whole system, because you're going to find yourself clicking on things and going to things. And then eventually you may go to your legislator's page, but this thing comes right into your email box. As a matter of fact, what we do here, Ryan, at the very end of the podcast, I do an extra segment called One More Thing, which is for our 400 and some odd valiant paid subscribers. They get that. And I have a special way that I have figured out how to get a lot more out of this for those people. So Ryan, if you'll stick with me, we're going to
Sure.
talk about that in a minute. But for everybody who's been watching this, there's a way that you can both help Ryan, CalMatters, Digital Democracy, Jon Fleischman, and So Does It Matter? You guessed it. Share this. We want you to like it. We want you to restack it if you're watching it on Substack, if you're watching it on YouTube, share it, like it. The more people that see this, the more people are going to be empowered to interact with their legislator, bust through the transparency wall that is erected by a very cumbersome and non-transparent process. And Ryan, I wanted to thank you very much for what you do and
Thank
everybody's
you.
doing over there. And thank you very much.
Thank you.